In this video, we're going to take a look at how to use the concatenate function. This function comes in handy when we're looking to join data together instead of manually needing to type or add columns together, or when we're looking to create a unique ID across data sets. For our first example, we'll look at two ways which we can use the concatenate function as well as the ampersand to join data together. And we'll pretend that our task for this is to create records in the email columns in the format of first name dot last name and including the @email.com. And the data we have over here is an ID, department, and then the first name, last name. So we want to create emails for each of these employees. To do that, we can start by typing the concat function. And then we can simply select which text we want to join. So this will be our first text, and then the second will be our last name. And then we can see that we want to add a period in between. So we'll go back into this. We'll do a quotation mark, period, quotation mark, add a comma after that. And that'll be our second text criteria. And then to get the @email, we can then add that as our fourth criteria. Hit enter. And there we can see that we now have first dot last name @email.com. Now let's drag this down and look at some other things that might come up when we're using the concatenate function. As we're looking through our records, we can see that there are some records with some spaces after them, as well as some last names that look like they were entered in the spreadsheet in lowercase. And if we were to click into those records, we could see that there's extra spaces here. And we can use some additional functions in Excel, such as a trim function, to get rid of those blank spaces. And we'll pull this back down. There you can see that the spaces are gone. Then if you wanted to make sure that everything was proper case, we could also use a proper case function around this cell and then pull that down. And there you can see that all of these names and email addresses are now in the correct format. Now, another way that we could use to join data is using the ampersand, which would be simply selecting the cell, ampersand, and then the next cell. There you can see we get the same result. And to mimic our previous formula, we can add our period, ampersand, and then after this one, we'll add our @email, and then close that in a quote. And there we can see that we get the same result. And if we drag this down, we can do the same thing with adding a trim function and proper to match the same formatting. So those are two ways in which we can join data sets together, as well as incorporate some other useful functions. Now, one other use case you might run into is needing to create a unique ID across two different data sets. In this case, we have SKU, description, product category, and amount sold. And we have another data set which has a product description, which is the combination of these two columns, unit price and stock level. And we want to combine all this data into one table. One way we could approach this is by creating a helper column to do a lookup based on, which would start with going back to our concat function. And we'll want to select the text to concatenate, which will be description of product category. And we'll notice that there's a space between these, so we'll want to make sure that we include that space by doing quote, space, quote, then a comma. And there we can see that this will now match. We pull that down. Then from here, we can use a lookup function. In this case, XLOOKUP will work. And we can look up this value into this column and return our unit price array. If not found, we'll hit an F, exact match. And let's pull this down. In this case, this data set is ordered so we can see the comparison, but we can see that we have now used the concatenate function to create a helper column to then do a lookup and pull over this column of information. Now, if we don't want to create a helper column, we can also include the concatenate function within the formula. And I'll delete this and show what that would look like. So in this case, we could do an X lookup. And in this case, the lookup value is going to be the concatenation that we just did, which will just build right into the X lookup function. So go to concat, we'll do this text, we'll do our space, and then we'll do our product category. And that'll be a lookup value. That will do the same formula that we just did last time. So we'll do this for our lookup array. Unit price will be a return array. And we'll finish that formula, hit enter. And there we can see that we get the same result. And then we could copy this formula into our next cell. And then we can just drag over unit price through stock level, pull that down. And there we have used the concatenate function to create a unique identifier between these two data sets to then pull over the additional columns that we would like. So those are a few ways that we can use a concatenate function in our Excel workflow to help us out.